Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday sew along. So, a couple of things that I want to share with you. First of all, last week I shared some fabric options that you might choose for making the BlockBuster Bash blocks. They are all going to be 12 inches and they're being selected from the BlockBuster patterns that are available on Studio 180 Design's website. I am going to be talking about the patterns, what to look for, how to download it, and all that kind of stuff. But I did have a couple more things come in this week that I thought I'd share with you that you might decide to use that for your BlockBuster Bash blocks. So remember I said sometimes I choose a focus fabric and then I pull my colors from that. These were all from Edita Sitar's new line, and I can't remember the name of it, Going Places or something like that. But it has this pretty aqua and green and red or coral fabric. There's a couple of tone-on-tones that I selected from her basics lines to throw in here as well. So you could use a combination of all of these. You could go one way or the other. It kind of has a peach and green thing going on, but it also, on the opposite side of it, has a blue and aqua and red. So you could mix and match, or you could just pick one or the other. And also we got some new Kansas Troubles pieces in. This is a layer cake. There's no reason why you couldn't use a layer cake, at least for some of the pieces. Some of the blocks you may need more than a 10-inch square, but this is also a good way you can start. And remember, Kansas Troubles works well to mix and match across different groups of fabrics. Tony went and looked, and the name of this Edita Sitar group is called Sweet Ride. I knew it had something to do with riding or going places. This is a line called Emma. We have a couple of fat quarter towers and some layer cakes. The yardage hasn't come in yet, but it should be here soon. But it's got a pretty green and blue, and it's even got some charcoal in there as well. So that could be your start for the blocks that you're going to be doing. So I chose to do red, white, and blue. And my blocks will eventually be donated to our local guild where they can make quilts of honor out of them. So you could also do that. They are not necessarily going to be the same red, white, and blue because I just grabbed a handful of fat quarters, and that's what I posted last week of the fabrics that I'm going to be using. So I've got a few of the blocks posted behind me that you can kind of see what's coming up eventually, but I thought I'd start with BlockBuster number 1. And so I want to talk about where you find them, how you download them, and how you know what to cut. So the fab patterns are available on Studio 180 Design's website. So I have downloaded the first one. There's a couple of things you can look for. It'll tell you the number. This is variation 1. And I'm thinking I haven't seen another variation in the BlockBuster patterns, but the Ohio Star is a block that you can mix and match units and put together lots of different combinations of things. This actually had a chart for several different sizes. So you could make the block in a 6-inch size, a 12-inch size, or a 15-inch size. And it also gives you what your finished size of the different units, what the units will be. Like the A unit is a quarter square triangle, and it tells you you're going to need 4 of them and what size squares you need to start with. And we're going to be talking about that as we go. Now, on the downloads that you'll be able to get from after the film, and I'll post a link to our file that I keep the patterns in. So this is kind of what you'll be getting. Put this down here where you can see it. I cut it in half because this is the part you need for figuring out how much fabric you need. I actually started out by writing it on my plates, and I thought that's kind of stupid. I can print it and cut it out and stick it on there. So that's what I started doing, was just taping the fabric amounts on there. I am showing you this because all the way across there is the link that gets you to the BlockBuster's page that looks like this. So you can actually go in there and download all of them. Keeping on you can download, I got sidetracked there for a second. You can download all of the patterns. Keep in mind, we're not going to do all of them because I'm not going to do any of the patterns that involve the specialty star tools or patterns that are a grid that you can't easily put in a 12-inch block. So also on our on the screen in front of me is our contact information, because we carry all of the tools, all of the technique sheets that I'll be demonstrating. I know some of you have them, but some of you may still need to add that to your toolbox. So that is something that you're going to want to collect. I'm using the fundamental tools, and we're going to be doing several of the blocks. And then I also talked about the fact that you could, let me find the right picture. Nope. Hang on just a second. I moved it over here. You can put together all kinds of groupings of the blocks. You can just do 3 of the blocks, pick out your 3 favorites as we go through them, and you can just make a table runner, pick out 6 of them. You can even repeat the same pattern and just make one project. This is the block for tonight. So you could just make 12 of them and make a quilt, or make 3 of them and make a table runner, or whatever. And we're going to be talking about that. This picture is just kind of a general guide to show you that you could put an alternating block in between, you could put sashing in between, or you could do the project with no sashing. And that's kind of what it would look like if you have all the same fabric in every block. So the alternating block is just a plain kind of a 9-patch chain. So that's an option for you as well. I'm not always going to give you options for how you can put the block together and just use that one block, but you should be able to see this page on the handouts from last week. So that also gives you some options. So I will be posting, let me change to this camera. I'll be posting in our file the Ohio Star Variation BlockBuster 1 cutting instructions. This is what you need to cut in order to make this into a 12-inch block. But I wanted to tell you how I even got to those numbers. Because, and I'm going to cover up a couple of things so it's just a little less confusing. Because we're looking at only this column, the 12-inch size. And I want to make quarter square triangles that are finished at 4 inches. I'm going to trim them to 4.5. That's what that means. But that's not what I have to start with in order to get a 4-inch hourglass or quarter square triangle. My half squares, I want them to finish at 2 inches. So I'm going to trim with my Tucker trimmer to 2.5 inches, but that's not what I start with in order to have what I need to trim. And I'm going to need 8 of those. The other thing I wanted to share with you is all of the pictures and cutting instructions I'm going to show you are going to be colored in red, white, and blue. That, of course, doesn't mean you have to do that. And what I've done is show you, if you're doing the hourglass unit, these are the fabrics you need in order to make that hourglass unit. And I'm listing the color I'm choosing. So if you need to know what it takes to make the hourglass unit, which is this unit right here, it has gold on one side, background on the other side, and 2 navy points. This is what you cut. If you want to do some other color, you still have to cut these pieces, but you may change what colors you cut for those squares. And the same thing with the half square units. Some of the blocks also have plain squares. So that's what this center is, a 4.5-inch square of red. And the corners, I need 4 2.5 inch squares of red and 4 2.5 inch squares of background. So that's what this all refers to. So when you look at the handout file, you're going to look for BlockBuster 1 Ohio Star. Next week you'll look for BlockBuster 2, and it'll have the name of that, and we'll talk about that next week. So hopefully that's clear. If you have questions, be sure and post them, or you're welcome to call us. It's just if you post them, that helps everybody who might have a question. So tonight, we're going to be walking through the process for making the Ohio Star block. So these are the colors I chose. Some of the blocks that I'm doing actually have more of a white. This is more of a cream, but you may not see that in the camera. But I've got gold on the inside of my hourglass units, and these are actually not stitched together. I've got my units all made, but I wanted to share with you. I talked a little bit last week about the fact that if you're making a 12-inch block, the units you put in it need to be easily divisible into 12. So I can put 9 units and have 3 across, and all of them should measure 4 inches finished. So I know that I can make my 12-inch block out of that with ease. It can be a plain square that finishes at 4 inches. It can be a pieced square. My hourglass unit is going to finish at 4 inches. Or it can be several units that when you combine them, that equals 4 inches. And so that's what I have here. And when you divide the unit into smaller units, then that always has to end up measuring to your 4 inches or whatever measurement you're after. So the first thing I want to do is talk about our hourglass unit. And I have divided my pieces here. And somewhere I've got another red square, but it's not in this stack. So we're going to talk about what it takes in order to make the hourglass unit. So I needed a cream square, a gold square, and I needed 2 of the dark blue squares. So I'm going to put those together by pairing up a gold and a blue and a cream and a blue. And so I'm going to go to the needle so I can show you how I put that together. So I'll do that second. But first, let's make our half squares, and that is simply made with squares of red and squares of blue and squares of cream. I grabbed the wrong stack. So I need 4 squares of blue and 4 squares of cream, or whatever color you're playing with. Remember, yours doesn't have to match mine. So we're making this unit, and then we're going to put them together to make that little 4 patch that is going in the corner. So in order to make my half squares, I'm simply pairing up my cream squares and my light blue squares. So I have had a chart that I've used before, and I want to share that with you again, just in case you haven't seen this. This is, let me bring this to the front. In this particular chart, it has 3 rows. We're going to be making half squares just by following the top row. And there's a note on the side that it says start with squares 1 inch larger than your finished size. So I know from my chart that I wanted to have a 2-inch finished unit. So that tells me I needed to start with 3-inch squares in order to get that. So that's what I have here. Then I'm going to use my Quilter's Magic Wand, and I'm going to use I'm using Le Pen. It's a permanent pen, but I mark very lightly. And I know we have some new people. Some of you have seen me do this before, and I actually broke my Quilter's Magic Wand in half because I like the shorter Magic Wand if I can get by with it. It's less cumbersome to use. I'm just lining up the etched line point to point on my square, and it really doesn't matter whether I mark on my cream colored square or my blue colored square for this step. I just need to mark on one or the other. So I'm going across point to point with the etched line, and then I'm just drawing a light line along the edge of my Quilter's Magic Wand. And I'm going to do that with all 4 squares. And I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to stitch them. So I'm going to pair up a cream colored square with a blue colored square, and I'm going to stitch on the line. So do we have any questions? Because my readout says that there's an issue, but I'm pretty sure that you can actually see, because last week it did this and you could still see, but for some reason I couldn't see.
Carol said your sound got a little fuzzy, but I think that was just...
It may have been, one of those crazy things, the sound comes and goes, but it may have to do with whatever my screen says. This is not available right now, but I know it is because you guys are still seeing me. So they've changed Facebook about 3 weeks ago, and so it's been a challenge finding the steps that I was used to doing in order to post my videos. But it seems to be working just fine, so we're going to go with that. So I am buddying up my squares, pretty sides together, face to face, and I'm stitching down the drawn line, and I'm doing assembly line style, just stitching from one square to the next. And I've got one more in order to make my 8 half squares. So what I decided, at least for a while, to do for a few of the blocks, I'm stitching units, and then I've actually already stitched some of them, so I have pieces and parts that I can put together and demonstrate with those. So I won't necessarily stitch and trim all of the units on camera, but at least you can kind of see the process. This is review for most of you anyway. If you don't own a Tucker trimmer, you need to contact us and get one. We have all of the tools. They are used to trim down units that are squares that have diagonal seams and multiple sizes. So I'm going to use the same tool to trim these 2-inch finished units that I will use to trim the 4-inch finished units. So that makes it really nice not to have to change tools for a similar unit. All right, so now I just flipped around. I didn't even tell you what I was doing. I turned around when I got to the end of my 4th square, and I came back on the 2nd line. So I have actually stitched on both lines. Now all I have to do is cut between. Now you want to make sure that you grab a tool that has enough space to protect your fingers. You don't want to use your Quilter's Magic Wand as a cutting tool because there's just not a space there to protect your fingers. So you want to grab something big enough to line up across your unit and cut them apart. So I have 4 units cut apart ready to press. So we're going to go to the overhead camera so you can see what that looks like. I had my iron on a minute ago, and we'll let it heat up real quickly. So I am making this unit with the 2 half squares, and I ended up with 8 units. Now you don't want to get real heavy-handed with your finger pressing or your iron. I like to finger press, especially these diagonal seams, before I actually put heat to them. That just kind of helps the seams go the way I want it to. And I'm pressing everything toward the darker fabric. I don't always do that, but on this one I am. Sometimes I press open, but as much as possible I try to press to one direction. So I wanted to show you another Ohio Star variation. There's an Ohio Star variation. Same tool made this that is going to make this. This one on the corners does not have this pieced four-patch, but I could have done that. This is also trimmed with the Tucker trimmer. It's a 1/2-inch finished unit. I'm probably not going to make very many of those, but I wanted you to see what you could do with the same tool that I'm going to be showing you. So I've got 4 of those finger pressed. I'm just going to set the iron on it, let the iron heat that up. And if you are using the acorn pressing pin, now's the time to just give your seams a swipe with that. It just helps everything lay down nice and flat. So I'm just giving that just a quick finger press or a quick swipe with the acorn pressing pin, and it just helps everything lay down flat and it's very crisp. So I have a half square here, and it's a little bit oversized. I don't know why, because I've still got my, everything says, maybe I just need to move my microphone down because it's underneath my chin, and as I'm looking down, maybe I'm obscuring. Okay, so I want to trim this to 2.5 inches. I have a diagonal line here that's going to line up with my seam, and I want to make sure that I have room around that 2.5-inch line to trim up the excess of that unit. So since I'm right-handed, I put the half circle on the top right corner of my unit, and I trimmed 2 sides. Now I'm going to turn 180 degrees and put that same diagonal line on my seam, and the dashed line here that measures the 2.5 inches is going on the cut edges. So I have a perfectly trimmed 2.5-inch unit. And I'm going to do that again. And I'm actually going to need to do that with all 8 of my half squares. Every square that I put together and sewed on the 2 lines is going to give me 2 units. So that's why I had to have 4 squares of each color in order to make my half square units. So if you are left-handed, all you have to do is put the half circle on the top left corner, and you're still going to line up on the seam. You're still going to look and make sure you have room all the way around your square to cut up the left side and across the top. I'm not going to try that. Going back to right-handed cutting. So I'm just going to line that up. And you're not going to trim very much away from a half square. Just a little tiny sliver. Sometimes it's just almost just those ears that stick out. So you can get rid of those and you don't have to get your scissors out to cut them. So you can see just what a tiny little amount I'm trimming. I'm only going to trim 4 of them because I want to jump to the next step. So once you get your 4 half squares trimmed, you're ready to put together a 4-patch. And the 4-patch is going to use 2 half squares and 2 solid squares. So when you make that 4-patch, you want your colors pointing toward each other. And then, this is the one I grabbed a while ago, you want your corner and your inner square to be on the opposite sides. So that is how you're going to put that together. When I stitched that, I also pressed it so that I have a little twizzle in the center. This one was also pressed toward the blue, and when you stitch that, you're going to end up with a little twizzle around the center. I'm going to stitch one of them just so you can see how I did that, just in case that's a new concept for you. So I'm going back to the sewing area and move all of this stuff out of the way. So you can see what I did. So I have my 2 half squares, and I have my corner square and my inside square. My half squares need to point toward each other, like that. And so my first thing I'm going to do is flip this one over. I'm not sure you could see what I was doing. Let's back this up so you can see it again. So there's my layout. I've got my 2 squares, half squares pointing toward each other, my red squares in the corner, and my cream square is going to be on the outer corner. So I'm ready to stitch that together. So I'm just going to flip the red one over on top of the half square and line up the edges. And I'm using a patchwork foot that is also called a a 1/4" foot, and it is very handy. You need to know where the 1/4" measurement on your machine is. And some machines are a little different. You may have to consult the manual to see where you need to guide your fabric. So I'm going to flip the half square over, and notice I'm not cutting in between. If I'm doing several of these, like I will need 4 of these units for my block, I would actually assembly line sew all of them, but I'm going to just add my fabric tag and park my needle and cut that so you can see what it looks like. So when I get that done, I'm going to press toward the half square both times. So I'll press toward the half square, and now I'm going to flip it over. When I do that, that makes these seams nest. So one goes right, one goes left, and that's what I want. Well, some of it I know that you couldn't see, but you should be able to see right now. What I'm showing you is the seams opposing. So you want to nest those together. If you feel the need to pin, you could pin here. I tend not to. I tend to get it where it is overlapped the way I want it to. My camera keeps bouncing back. That's part of my issue. And once I get, I've noticed I've not taken my finger, no, you can't see it. I have not taken my finger off of that point where they need to match up. I'm just lining up the others so that I can stitch right across there. When I get to this point, then I can attend to the end where I'm going to come off the needle last. And I'm still using the 1/4" foot guiding along the edge of my 1/4" foot. And I would do that 4 times. Now I'm going to park the needle, and I'll show you how I did the twizzle. So let's check and make sure it matched. That's what I want. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is break that chain. Remember when I had I stitched from one unit to the next, I did not cut the chain. I'm just going to cut that, and you should be able to just twist, and those 2 or 3 stitches in between should come out. If you need to grab a seam ripper to get those stitches out, you can, but that makes that lay down nice and flat. So then when you are pressing, and I press from the front so I can feel it, all of the seams need to follow the leader around the center point. So this one goes this way, this one goes this way, this one goes this way, and this one goes this way. That makes that center lay down nice and flat. So as much as possible, you want to do the little twizzle thing on your pressing. Sometimes it doesn't work, but that is how I pressed in order to have that lay down nice and flat. So let's talk about how we get that hourglass unit. You're going to find that it's going to start and look very similar to what I did with the half square. I'm going to start with 2 squares, and I'm going to put them face to face. I'm going to draw a couple of lines like I did before, and I'll show you those steps. But we're actually going to skip that center row. So notice where it says our 1/4 square or hourglass units start with squares 1½ inches larger than your finished size. So that's the size that's on your paperwork for how big you need to cut your squares to begin with. So here are my 2 squares. I'm going to buddy up my cream with my blue, and I don't actually have to have them overlapped in order to make my marks, but I had them close enough that I went ahead and overlapped them. Now this time I have to use the whole magic wand because my little broken piece won't go all the way across the square. And it's important that I be able to get all the way across the square. So I'm going to use a whole magic wand, and I'm going to draw a light line all the way across both sides. I have had somebody say that they put a little bit of Invisigrip on the back of their magic wand to keep it from slipping. I don't really have an issue with that, but you know, that's not to say someday I might not. So if you have trouble with your magic wand sliding around on you, that is an option for keeping it where it didn't slide. But I'm just holding it, and I'm going to mark all the way down one side, and then you kind of have to do the other side, or I do, in shifts. I've had a few people that are ambidextrous, and they can mark one side with the right hand and switch and mark one side with their left hand. I can't do that. So I've got it marked with a double line all the way across. I have one combination that's gold and navy, and I have another combination that is cream and navy, and that's what I need for right now. So I'm going to go to my needle. I'm going to back up so maybe you can see, and it keeps bouncing back. So I'm going to go and stitch right on the line. I'm going to go all the way across, and I'm doing assembly line style. So when I get to the other side, I'm just going to stitch off of the first one and onto the second one, and stitch all the way across. And then when I get to the end of this square, since I only need these 2 units, I'm going to turn, stitch across the end. This is what I did before. I just didn't tell you. I just did it. Now I'm going to come back on the other line. And just go from one unit to the other one. And I generally have a couple of different fabric tags close by, but since I know exactly where this one is, I'm going to grab it and cut, and then park my needle. And now I'm ready to cut in between and press. So I'm going to the overhead camera so you can see what that looks like. So I have my pieces, and I'm going to grab something that I can cut with. I'm going to turn it on this side so you can see that I can cut with to protect my fingers. And notice it doesn't get all the way across, but I can slide it and cut that without any trouble. Notice you see just a little bit of pink from my lip pen I was using. You never see that from the front. I do try to make my mark as lightly as I can get by with, so you want to make sure that you do that. Now on all 4 of these half square units, I have a blue triangle. So I want to press to whatever color I have on every half square. So I've got a navy and a cream. I'm just going to give it a quick little finger press and set my iron on it. And I'm going to press this one toward the navy. I'm going to press this one toward the navy. And notice I just let the iron do the work. Sometimes I think we work too hard on pressing, and we actually are distorting our blocks by being too heavy-handed with our iron. So I'm just going to give it just a little acorn pressing solution, set my iron on it, and let the iron do the work. And notice I'm just stacking them. They get a little extra heat that way while I'm preparing the next one, and I've got all 4 of them with just a little acorn pressing solution. Now I'm ready to combine these. So I have 4 half squares, and I'm going to need to buddy them up like this. A cream with a gold and a cream with a gold. They're both going to have blue. So I'm going to take this back to the needle so you can see what I'm doing. Now I have my units here, and I need to draw another double line. And I usually draw on the lighter one, but it doesn't matter as long as you can see it, your markings. So that's what I have here. I've got my magic wand, and it's going from point to point all the way across. Give it a quick little mark. And if you can see your markings from the front, you're marking too hard. So I can barely see that, but I can see it enough to stitch on it. So I'm going to buddy those up together, and now I'm going to mark on this one. I'll line that up, and notice the other one I marked from the cream first to the blue absolutely does not matter on this step. Line that up and draw my line all the way across. So again, I can see the line here on my blue. You may not be able to see that on the camera just because of the darkness of the fabric, but I think you can see when I get down here to the needle where I'm actually stitching. So I'm going to buddy these up. Now, one thing I do want to do is match up my blue with my blue so that those seams nest. And you can actually feel that with your fingertips. Theoretically, you're going corner to corner, across to corner, but you want to make sure that it is nested really well right here in the center. And I can feel that to know that it's nested. I'm just going to stitch across on my line. And then I'm going to grab the next one. I want the blue to be opposite. And it does not matter whether I'm stitching from the blue to the cream or the cream to the blue. I just want to go across on those lines. And right now I'm feeling for that seam to make sure that they're nested the way I want them to. And they should nest all the way across. If they don't, your seam may not be straight. And you may need to do a little work on that before you try to stitch it. Because if your seam is not straight all the way across, it may be difficult to trim it where it's straight when you get finished. So I'm going to turn and sew across the end and turn again and sew down the line, and I'm just going from unit to unit. And when we get to here, I know it's still nested, so I'm just going to zip right across there, grab my fabric tag off of here so I can park my needle. And now I've got my units done, so I'm ready to cut this. We'll go to the overhead camera because I've got a place I can cut. So here is the 2 units together. Here are the 2 units together. I'm going across. So there's one hourglass unit. There's another hourglass unit, and I'm going to do that with this one. I'm just cutting corner to corner between the 2 lines of stitching, and now I'm ready to press. Now, because I have a seam in the middle that meets up, I can actually twizzle that as well. Just give it a little twist, and I can feel that with my fingertips, and I press over, make sure that I give it a little finger press so that it lays down, and then I can set my iron on it while I get the next one finger pressed, and you just give it a little twist, and it takes out those 2 or 3 stitches, and I'm going to give it another little finger press, and you can feel with your fingers whether the seam's going the correct way.
You need to tell Amy yes.
Amy, Tony says I need to say yes. What am I saying yes to? Oh, yes. Yes, Cliff and I both machine quilt. Our lives have changed in the last year. I actually fell and damaged my shoulder, so I was out of commission for a while I had surgery. Most of you know that. But I'm back to quilting, not every day, but only because some days I've got other things I have to do. And Cliff does all of our quilting. He stays pretty busy, so don't wait till the last minute and expect that you're going to get a quilt done. And the other thing, most of you know, because if you've watched me very long, we have a daughter who graduated from Rhodes College last year, and she won a Fulbright Fellowship, and she is in Estonia for 10 months. So it's a new experience for everybody. I feel blessed that we can talk to her nearly every day, several times a day actually right now, and so we don't worry about her so much since we do get to see her face because she calls on FaceTime. But it's very interesting the things she's learning, and she is going to be making a video blog, and she has an Instagram account. So, and all prayers are appreciated for her time away from us. But that is kind of what we're up to these days. So if you didn't know, Estonia is across the Baltic Sea from Finland, so she's a good way away. All right, so now I'm ready to trim this. Remember, this has to match this unit where I sewed these together, and it has to be also matching this center square. So this is a 4.5-inch square. It will finish at 4, but what I'm going to trim this to is 4.5. Now the really cool thing about the Tucker trimmer, while it will trim the half squares and do a really nice job of it, half squares only have one seam to worry about. With this, I have 2 diagonal seams that need to meet in the center. So what I'm doing is looking for the cross line that says 4.5 and the solid common line that is in every size. So where that 4.5 comes across the common line, I know that X belongs on the center point of my unit. And when I get it in the right place, that X will disappear just because of the colors, the darkness of my blue. But when I get it in place, I've got my long 4.5-inch dash line across and the bold solid line across, and I'm ready to trim. And I'm still trimming very little, just a little bit on all 4 sides. So I'm going to trim 2 sides, and then I'm going to turn 180 degrees, and I'm going to trim again. This time I've got the center point of the 4.5 inches, but I've also got the dash line on the cut edges, and once I get those in place, I'm ready to cut. When I get that done on all 4 units, then I can check to make sure that I have got this trimmed properly. If it doesn't match up with my center, I've got a problem, and I've got to figure out where it is. If it doesn't match up with my corner 4 patch, then there's a problem. So you want to fix that problem before you start trying to put together the whole block. Once you get all your units done, then you simply combine all of them, and it's going to be put together like this. Now, that's not to say you have to do it this way, because I could turn my units around and create a different layout. And you are welcome to do that with your block, because after all, these are just shapes we're playing with. Your shapes do not have to be in the same arrangement mine does. And so the other thing, notice here, it creates this white square on point in the middle. It's actually cream, but it looks white in the camera. So you can devise a block however you want. I could even turn these around a quarter turn and create a secondary pattern that way. So they kind of create a ring around the center, almost like bird wings going around. So you can put together your units any way you want, as long as each unit is 4.5 inches before you try to sew it together, you should be fine. So do I have other questions? I cannot see any questions.
No, she just thinks she needs to go visit.
Well, it all remains to be seen. She's been there a week, so I couldn't say anything last week because I just didn't figure I could say it without a few tears. But she left last Tuesday morning. So far she's having a good time and learning a lot and enjoying the people she's meeting. So it's a new experience for everybody. So until next week, first of all, go to the link that I'll send you. If you're on the email group, you'll get an email just in a few minutes about where to find the handouts. Also, you can tell your friends if they want to follow, they can go to our YouTube page and follow the videos there, and then so they can sew along with us. So what I would suggest is kind of take a look at some of the BlockBuster patterns, and like I said, you may not want to do all of them, but I hope you'll do at least some of them. The Tucker trimmer, the wing clipper, the square squared, the split Rex, the V block, the corner beam, and the corner pop. Those are the ones we're going to be using in the next few weeks. So until next time, happy sewing, and come by and see us, and we'll supply the tools you need for the project. So happy sewing. Bye-bye.
So Amy
Amy
Campbell.
Campbell, that's right.